Solo Leveling, Episode 3. It's like a game. He awoke with the silence of death surrounding him. Jinwoo Sung blinked into the sterile white void of the hospital ceiling, the harsh fluorescent lights washing his vision in pale agony. The steady beep of a heart monitor kept rhythm with the quiet throb of pain behind his ribs. Each breath was jagged, brittle, like he was inhaling glass. Alive. Somehow, unbelievably, he was alive. But the relief never came. Not really. It was hard to feel grateful when your soul was screaming. The images burned into the back of his eyelids returned the instant his consciousness did. The towering statues, their stone grins soaked in crimson. Screams. Blood. That deep, resonant voice that had boomed like a god. Those who do not worship shall die. And they had. All of them. He saw their faces again, flickering behind his eyelids like ghosts. Mr. Song's last scream. The priestess's silent prayer before she was torn apart. The loud ones, the brave ones, the ones who should have survived. They were all gone. And him? He had only trembled, fallen to his knees, waited for death. Why had it not come? The door creaked open, and a nurse entered, clipboard in hand, gasping when she saw him awake. Moments later, the doctor followed. Kind eyes, wrinkled face, a voice that tried to sound gentle, but Jinwoo barely heard it. Words washed over him like distant waves. You were the only one we found alive. That sentence kept echoing, bouncing against the walls of his skull like a curse he couldn't escape. The only one. He should have felt blessed, grateful. He should have been weeping in joy. But all he felt was guilt, heavy and wet like blood-soaked clothes. His fingers clenched the thin hospital sheets, nails digging into the fabric as if he could anchor himself to something real. He remembered lying there in that cursed temple, the stone altar beneath him warm with the blood of the fallen. He had stared into the eyes of that monstrous god statue and waited for judgment. But it never came. And now the world expected him to live as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just crawled out of hell. That night, as moonlight painted shadows across the white walls of his room, Jinwoo sat in silence, his broken body propped up by pillows. The sounds of life beyond the hospital, the distant hum of cars, the soft murmur of night shift nurses, felt foreign, unreal. His fingers twitched as if reaching for something. Anything. And then something appeared. Not something in the room. Something in front of his eyes. A soft chime, like the ring of a bell underwater. A translucent blue panel flickered into existence, hovering in midair. His heart stuttered. He blinked once, twice, but it remained. Open quote, "You have met the secret conditions. You have been chosen as a player." Close quote. What the hell? Jinwoo leaned back, disbelief flooding his chest. He reached out instinctively, but his fingers passed through the glowing letters. They weren't projected light, they weren't anything physical, but they were real. More messages followed. Open quote, daily quest, the courage of the weak, 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, 10 kilometers run, basic stretching. Failure to complete the quest will result in a penalty. Close quote. He laughed. A hollow, broken sound. He was still on painkillers, clearly hallucinating. But the window didn't vanish, even when he closed his eyes, even when he screamed into his pillow trying to wake himself up. At midnight, everything changed. Jinwoo was wrenched from sleep, not by a sound, not by pain, but by the feeling of falling. The floor beneath him vanished, and the world turned black. He fell into darkness, the air ripping past him like a scream. His body hit solid ground with a dull crack. The cold bit into his skin. He groaned, trying to sit up, only to hear a low, monstrous hiss behind him. He turned, and his blood froze. Towering above him was a beast, massive, writhing, its body made of thick armored segments like a centipede crafted from shadows. Eyes like molten lava locked onto him, and fangs dripped venom. Open quote, penalty zone activated. You have failed to complete your daily quest. Survive for 4 hours. Close quote. Jinwoo screamed. The creature lunged. He ran. He ran harder than he had ever run in his life. Limbs screaming in protest, his injuries splitting open, fresh blood painting the rocky ground. The landscape was surreal, a hellish terrain lit by flickers of red light and mist. He had no idea where he was, what he was. He just knew one thing. If he stopped, he would die. 4 hours felt like eternity. He tripped, crawled, scrambled up jagged cliffs, hid behind black stones, his heart thundering so loud he thought it would betray him. Every second was agony, every breath tasted like iron, but somehow he lived. The world snapped back into the sterile hospital room. He collapsed onto the cold tile floor, soaked in sweat, chest heaving, eyes wide with terror. And the blue screen reappeared, calm as ever. Open quote, penalty complete, daily quest will resume tomorrow. Close quote. He didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. How could he, knowing the nightmare was real? The next day, when the clock struck morning, the quest reappeared again. Jinwoo didn't hesitate this time. He dragged himself out of bed, every muscle screaming. He dropped to the floor and began the push-ups. Each movement felt like knives carving into his chest. He groaned, teeth gritted, tears blurring his vision. The nurses yelled when they saw him. The doctor begged him to stop, but he couldn't, because he'd rather die trying than be thrown back into that place. And somehow, he finished. 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats. He stumbled through the run, gripping the walls of the corridor like a madman, dragging his half-healed body inch by inch through the ward. The world called him insane. But the blue screen rewarded him. Open quote, quest complete, stat points awarded, close quote. And something strange happened. The next morning, he didn't ache as badly. His legs felt steadier, his arms firmer. He could see faint outlines of muscle on his frame, like his body was sculpting itself overnight. Was he getting stronger? Open quote, you have leveled up. Close quote. He stared at the screen, heart pounding. Was this what it meant to be a player? No hunter had ever leveled up after awakening. It was impossible. Once assigned a rank, your fate was sealed. Your power was static. But Jinwoo, he was changing. Every completed quest made him stronger, faster, sharper, and with each day, something inside him shifted. The shame he'd carried like a shroud began to loosen. The fear that had once controlled every breath now bowed before the slow rise of something else, resolve. No more apologies, no more weakness. If the world was going to throw him to the wolves, then he'd become something the wolves would fear. The screen gave him a reward box after a week of consistent quests. He tapped it, expecting a potion or a stat boost. Instead, a small, rusted key fell into his hand. Open quote, key to the instant dungeon, Demon's Castle, close quote. And then, reality warped. A glowing rift opened beside his bed, swirling, humming with energy, like the air itself was being torn apart. He could feel the heat radiating from it, hear the faint echoes of growling beasts beyond the veil. It wasn't just a portal, it was a call. He stared at the key in his hand, then at the dark passage before him. This was suicide. He knew it. He was still recovering, still weak by most standards, still an E rank. But his fingers tightened around the key, because what scared him more than death was standing still, being weak again, helpless, trapped in a world where people like him were nothing more than cannon fodder. He thought of his sister, studying hard in school, believing in a brother who always came home alive. He thought of his mother, asleep in that coma, wires and machines keeping her alive, while debt piled up like a mountain no one dared to climb. He thought of himself, lying on that temple floor, waiting to die. No more. If this was a game, then it was a game he would win. Because for once, the world had given him a chance. Not mercy, not kindness, just a sliver of opportunity. And that was enough. Without another word, he stepped toward the portal. It shimmered, whispered, consumed him. And then darkness, but not the kind that devoured, the kind that waited. It's like a game, he whispered into the shadows, and I'm done losing.